Call the meeting to order, please. This is the Village of Trustee Board of Trustees regular meeting for Thursday, July 17, 2014. The time is 7:02. I would ask, who's calling the roll tonight? Mr. Hamilton. Okay.
Village President South.
Here.
Trustee Hamilton.
Here.
Trustee Pollock.
Here.
Trustee Ballering.
Here.
Trustee Collins.
Here.
Trustee Foley.
Here.
And on the phone is Trustee Sussman, who, due to a family medical emergency, is requesting to participate because she is located more than 100 miles from our present location. In order to do so,
Yeah, just make sure she says that's correct.
is that correct, Trustee Sussman?
Yes,
In order for her to participate, we would need first someone to recognize that that is Trustee Sussman on the line, and two, to make a motion to allow her to participate by phone.
That's Jean. I swear to God, it's Jean.
Motion by
I second that, swear to God.
And I'll make a motion that we allow her to.
I expect someone to say no, actually.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Foley,
Yes.
second by Ms. Hamilton. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Welcome, Ms. Sussman.
Thank you.
Would you please rise for the pledge?
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and good evening to everyone who's here and all those watching at home. For those folks who are here, you're welcome to speak to the Village Board at any time on any topic. If you'd like to speak early, you can do so during public comment, or if you prefer, you can wait till a specific agenda item comes up and be recognized at that time. I just ask that you be recognized by the President and make your comments from the podium so that the folks at home can hear and see what you have to say. So first up is public comment. Would anyone like to address the board? Hearing none, we'll move along to reports of village officers. I have no report this evening, so I will turn it over to Mr. Manager.
The only item that I have to report is to provide the community with an update in regards to Swan Pond. After some back and forth between the Army Corps and the village, the Army Corps has agreed to make the restorations to the embankment where the pipe the soil had eroded from this past winter. We are still working with them on hopefully persuading them to consider whether or not they can provide any sort of assistance in regards to the two other issues, mainly the plantings and the grading. But village staff is working with our village engineer. In the event that the Army Corps is not receptive to that, then we will move forward with coming back to the board with a proposed plan and cost in rectifying that issue. But we are happy that the Army Corps has agreed to make the restoration to the embankment where the pipe exits out into the river. That is all I have.
Any questions about that? Mr. Wright? Of course, please do.
Richard Ray, 262 Lionel. I'm sure you noticed that the sediment is built up at the head wall and in the pipe. And there's a considerable amount of debris against the grillage. So water basically can't get in to that outlet at all. And I'm wondering whose responsibility that is to clean that up.
That's our responsibility, and we will be doing that.
Okay. It seems to me that should have done that a long time ago, if you knew that was your responsibility.
Well,
Because the more recent floodings happening in Swan Pond are a result of the sediment and debris at the grill.
the village chose not to take any action until we could work out something with the Army Corps to determine who would be responsible for what.
Okay. So from now on, I can expect that the village will be maintaining the head wall.
Yes?
Okay, thank you.
Any other comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to the approval of the consent agenda. Are there any items that any trustee needs removed for discussion? Seeing none, I would ask for a motion and a second to approve.
Motion.
Motion by Ms. Collins, second by Mr. Ballerine. Please call the roll.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Trustee Ballerine.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Foley.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Motion carries.
Carries.
We have no reports of departments or commissions, so we will move on to ordinances and resolutions. Let me find our first resolution here. I forgot my iPad tonight, so now I have a stack of paper in front of me.
I'm looking for it.
Here we go. I got it. Okay. First up is a consideration of a resolution approving a contribution by the Village of Riverside in an amount not to exceed $30,000 for construction of a bike path adjacent to and west of First Avenue between Riverside Brookfield High School and 31st Street. And before I present this, I would ask for a motion and a second to approve the resolution.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Hamilton, second by Mr. Ballerine. This resolution is the culmination of a great deal of work that's been done over the past several months between a collaboration really between Riverside, North Riverside, District 208, IDOT, the Forest Preserve, and at the leadership of Commissioner Jeff Tobolski. For a long time now, really since the 1980s, and I have a map here I wanted to share with you, there has been an effort to connect the Salt Creek Trail. As you can see, right now it terminates approximately at Brookfield Zoo. It goes west about 27 miles all the way out to Bemis Woods near 294. And then the southern component actually is right on the other side of Berry Point Bridge, goes down 39th and connects then into Cermak Woods. So since the 80s, there's been a desire to try to not only connect that route, but also to try to find a way for students from North Riverside and the northern part of Riverside to get to Brookfield High School on an off-road bike path in a safe manner. There have been some improvements. North Riverside currently has an off-road bicycle path along 26th Street that runs to First Avenue. And as the board knows, this board approved a number of bike routes within the Village of Riverside. So if you continue on 26th Street to Des Plaines, you can then enter into Riverside and take one of our 3 bicycle routes that would take you down to the Berry Point Bridge. So this little section here is actually a combination of both our Olmsted and our Wright routes. So as you can see, there's been a gap from the First Avenue and 26 down to Riverside Brookfield High School. Early this year, this village board took really an unprecedented step when it authorized construction of a 600-foot path, multi-use path, in front of Riverside Brookfield High School. And I was very pleased at the courage and the confidence of this board in doing that, because really that was what lit the fuse for the project as it then unfolded. Because basically we built a 600-foot path at that point to nowhere. So the question was, would we be able to complete the path? And I'm glad to say that when Commissioner Tobolski got involved, and through our cooperation with North Riverside and District 208, North Riverside, the school district, and Village of Riverside entered into a collaborative agreement to build the north-south route from in front of Riverside Brookfield High School up to 31st Street. So this will be an 8-foot wide multi-use path beginning in front of the high school on the north side of Ridgewood, going up to the zoo sign, and then going behind the zoo sign at 31st Street. The 2 villages in the school district, with cooperation from the Forest Preserve District and IDOT, who have been instrumental in this and agreeing to actually provide permits for the construction of this route, basically were agreed that we would come up with $100,000 of the $200,000 project. What you're being asked for tonight is the $30,000 contribution from Riverside. That would come out of our motor fuel tax funds. North Riverside has agreed to provide $37,000 and District 208, $33,000. North Riverside notably has also provided all of the engineering for this project and has agreed to maintain this path in perpetuity with the Forest Preserve District. So it gets even better. Once it became apparent that the communities in the school district were going to hold together, Commissioner Tobolsky took this to the Cook County Board, and the Cook County Board now has agreed to fund the remaining $100,000 of this path, and they're voting on that next Tuesday. So the first section from Riverside Brookfield High School to 31st Street is expected to be built this year. We have a pretty aggressive construction plan. If all goes well, we would actually have this constructed by Thanksgiving is the goal. A lot of that is dependent, of course, upon the MWRD project and the IDOT project with regard to the intersection improvements in front of Riverside Brookfield High School. Once that was accomplished, once we had that first section in place, we then invited Senator Martin Sandoval to our meetings. And Commissioner Tobolsky laid out in very clear detail the benefits, not only in terms of connecting the Salt Creek Trail, but the regional benefits to the students and residents involved in having this north-south connector. And Senator Sandoval at that meeting pledged that he would provide funding either through IDOT or through an appropriation from the state of Illinois to complete the path, going from the corner of 1st and 31st, westbound to Gulfview, and then north on Gulfview, tying back into 1st Avenue and connecting into the off-road path up at 26th Street. So this would be built in 2015. And as you can see, it completes the decades-long desire to have an off-road path connecting from the Salt Creek Trail all the way down through the Cermak Woods to hit the Portage. So this is the project that is before you tonight. I can't say enough about the cooperation that we have received from North Riverside and District 208. The Forest Preserve District and IDOT I mean, people think that they are a red tape organization. You haven't seen them at work on this project because they have really cleared the way to make this happen. And quite frankly, none of this would have happened without the guiding hand of Commissioner Tobolsky to keep everybody together and focused and on task. So that is what is before you this evening. So any questions or discussion?
The zoo, do they have to relinquish any land along that path, or is there enough land along First Avenue without that?
The path along First Avenue is all within the IDOT right-of-way. The zoo has agreed, though, if necessary, to move any of the fencing back that's along that stretch. It likely will be that we have to move some of the fencing behind the sign back, and the zoo has agreed to do that in cooperation with the project. Hearing no further, yes, sir, Mr. Foley.
I think that, going back, I'm looking at Jerry out here and going through it when Mr. Buttermer was on the board a long time ago, when we were able to participate in some ICE-T grant money to do this path, and Riverside opted out, and we were kind of the missing piece of this puzzle. I think it's important for us to participate in this. We were the missing link in the last part of the trail system in the past, and I think it's a very good project, and we should be part of it.
Mr. Powell?
Oh, I was just going to say that it's a great example of public partnership, and I think everyone, all of the municipalities, the villages and municipalities involved, all the public organizations that are involved, should just be very proud of themselves for their cooperation. And it's a great gift to the residents and to people who visit our area from biking in 25 miles or however far they bike in, to be able to bike through the village.
Thank you very much. Mr. Powell?
I could certainly see the regional benefits of this, and certainly on a regional basis, it looks like something that would be of great benefit, connecting the trails. I could certainly see the benefit to North Riverside students accessing RB. I'm less sure about the direct benefits to Riverside residents. I'm wondering what we see as the direct benefit to Riverside residents, given that they can access from 26th Street and 31st Street internally into the village.
Can I respond? What I see as a direct benefit to Riverside is that we're talking about that intersection of Forest and First Avenue being so crowded. And if we can get North Riverside students to bike or walk to school, that will reduce cars in that intersection. And so I see it nothing but a positive, that it could seriously help that intersection if we could reduce some of the cars that need to drop the kids off there. In addition to the fact of the Riverside residents who want to use the bike path, but.
Just one more comment. I don't see that great of a benefit to Riverside residents, but on the other hand, it's in our village, and I think we have an obligation to participate, and based on that, I do support moving forward with this.
Further comment? Hearing none, please call the roll. Sure.
Donald Spadney, 111 Woodside. You just said it. It's in our village and it's our obligation. I think this is a good idea, so I'm not against this. But I sent you a letter this week because, you know, we're all talking about we're doing things for the students and we're doing things for transportation and we're linking everything up. We have a terrible situation in front of the high school, which was part of the letter in the little plan I sent you. And my idea was to segue in on this wonderful magnanimous cooperation between all these agencies. As long as you got it going, maybe we could get the zoo and the high school and Riverside and maybe Pace Bus and who knows, the county and anybody else that's got a couple of bucks and build something at the corner of Gulf and where Washington and Ridgeview come together, right in front of the high school. On the southeast corner, there's the high school sits there. And at that corner, you have people waiting for the buses going east and west. And public transportation is what you want kids to do. A lot of kids take the buses, you know. And there's no place to sit. And there's no place to get any shelter. And when you're waiting for the eastbound bus at the corner of Forbes there, you have to sit actually with your feet in the street. I mean, these kids are sitting on the curb there, and I think probably a lot of people here have seen it, with their feet in the street. The bus comes around a blind corner because there's a big hedge, and you know they're darting out into the street to see if the bus is coming. Where if something was built over on the school, essentially the school's front lawn, cooperatively, that had a little shelter aspect to it, they would be able to see way down Washington going west and way south to First Avenue, where you don't want to have buses stopping anymore, really. And then they could go to their appropriate bus stop when the bus is coming. And they also have some shelter out there. And I think that should really be looked at. And as long as you've got all this wonderful, you know, friendship going with all these agencies, I thought it was a great opportunity to come and suggest that you explore that, you know. And also the cost of these things. You know, why don't you suggest this and toss in $5,000 of this money and give them 25? You know, this business about it's $200,000 and it's $300,000 and all that. That's all, you know, flotsam and jetsam, right? I mean, who knows what the actual cost of it is? That's like the money that was going to be spent in the Swan Pond, you know, and it wasn't. But they missed it by a couple of $1 million, right? So they spent 5.2 and promised a 7.6. So, you know, I don't want to rain on your parade, and I think it's great you got this together, and I think it's a useful thing. Because when I first came to this area, I lived in North Riverside, and it's impossible to get up and down that street. However, in the winter, nobody's going to ride their bike there, right? But they're going to be waiting for the buses. And that would be a really nice thing to do, and that is the gateway to Riverside, not where those crazy-looking, you know, stone towers are. That's not the gateway to Riverside. Riverside begins up at the other end of the high school. So it might be something to make a little welcome center there. Also maybe lure some people down from the zoo to come to Riverside for our enlightened or energized CBD. Right? So there's a lot of reason to look at doing this. And as long as you got these 4 people in a room, we're talking about it, why don't we try to get something built there for the kids, okay? And the zoo workers. The zoo workers are very important. This is something the zoo ought to do. They ought to kick in some money into this. They're throwing a ton of concrete around on 31st Street, as you know, in front of the North Gate right now, and building something that's completely useless and basically put a bunch of white concrete, ugly concrete out there. But they could do something like this because it's those zoo workers that are sitting there all the time, because they do use the buses to go to Chicago or wherever they come from to go to work. And they're sitting on a curb or on the grass, and you can't do that in the rain, you know. So we ought to look at that, okay?
Thank you.
By the way, those concrete towers is your opinion. I think they look very, very nice where
They're
they're
not
at.
in the right place. That's not where
I think
Riverside
they
should
look
be.
very nice where they're at.
Yeah, well, they might look nice too.
It's because we all have our own opinions.
Mr. Ballerini. Any further discussion on what we're actually talking about, which is the bike path? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Trustee Hamilton?
Aye.
Trustee Pollitt?
Aye.
Trustee Ballerini?
Aye.
Trustee Collins?
Aye.
Trustee Foley?
Motion carries.
Trustee Sussman?
Oh, sorry, Trustee Sussman?
Yes,
Is that an aye?
that's an aye.
Okay. Thank you. Next up is a resolution authorizing the village manager to execute a sales agreement with Miles Chevrolet of Decatur, Illinois, for the purchase of one 2014 Chevrolet Tahoe PPV Police Interceptor for an amount not to exceed $30,425.60 for replacement of a 2011 Chevrolet Tahoe PPV Police Interceptor that was totaled in an accident. And before we have discussion, I'd ask for a motion in a second.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Collins, second by Ms. Hamilton. Chief Weitzel, were you going to inform us on this?
Yes, we have, there's only 2 left in the state, the state bids, and the Decatur dealership was the state bid for the state police. As you know, when we buy our squads, we are able to get RZA Ford to match the state bid, and that's why we get our squads from there. But they have no more. Either does Phelan Chevrolet. So we had to search around, and they have 2 of the vehicles left in Decatur. So the village would be expending, and the finance director can correct me if I'm wrong, that approximately $6,500. The replacement cost, once it was totaled, the insurance company for the car that struck our squad car is paying about $23,000. And they are going to replace all the equipment that's inside the squad car. They've already written us a check for $12,000 for equipment in the car. The squad car equipment inside will total approximately $20,000 once we have that detail sent through IRMA back to Allstate, which is the company we're dealing with. They have already given us a commitment that they will pay for all the equipment. So the squad is basically going to be purchased with $6,500 from us, and we will be reimbursed through the insurance company.
Questions and discussion?
Was the equipment damaged in the accident also? Was all the equipment totaled?
There's a lot. The frame was bent. That's really the reason the car is totaled. But the squad car computer is damaged. The modems are damaged. The cage that separates the officers from the prisoners snapped. The side shields on the cars to keep the prisoners from kicking out the squad cars broke. The microphone on the radio broke. The police radio broke. The squad car camera is broke. The device that records the camera and sends it wirelessly into our system is broke. So there's a lot of electronic equipment. They just required us to document it, then take photos of all the equipment, and then submit it through IRMA, who then submits it through Allstate. So that's what's taken us some time to get this replacement money.
I was really surprised when I looked at the photos. I had no idea that there was such a devastating consequence to that crash.
Yeah, it was severe.
And did I read in the CIP memo that you put that there's still an opportunity to recoup that money yet from Allstate, or is that we've gotten as much as we're going to get?
No, they still owe us some money. correct? They have cut us a check for some, but they're just waiting for more paperwork from us.
Basically, how the process goes with IRMA is we submit all of our expenses, provide them with the title for the totaled vehicle, they issue us a check, and then they subrogate on our behalf so that the village is made whole. So essentially, we'll be getting a check from IRMA for the $23,000 in addition to all the expenses that are incurred, in addition to the expenses for the equipment.
And, just yesterday, the insurance company called us and agreed to also pay for the striping and all the changeovers. So we submitted a bill saying we shouldn't pay. We submitted a request to IRMA and then to them saying we shouldn't even have to pay to have the car changed over, and they agreed with us. So they're going to pay for the striping and they're going to pay all the new equipment that goes into it. The village will get reimbursed for that.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Trustee Hamilton?
Aye.
Trustee Pollock?
Aye.
Trustee Sussman?
Aye.
Trustee Valerie?
Aye.
Trustee Collins?
Aye.
Trustee Foley?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Chief, and thank God Sergeant Miller wasn't hurt.
Pardon me?
Thank God Sergeant Miller wasn't hurt in that accident.
Yeah.
Yes, if you've
It
seen
was a-
that video.
it was a
you know.
frightening video.
You could have
Yeah.
been much more serious.
Next up is a resolution approving a form agreement in regard to reimbursement of firefighter training, certification, and equipment costs. Before presentation, I'd ask for a motion and a second. Motion and a second, please.
Oh, so moved.
Motion by Ms. Hamilton, second by Mr. Pollock. Mr. Kimura, would you like to present?
Thank you, President Sells. Good evening. The Village of Riverside Fire Department provides firefighter training, certifications, and equipment to paid-on-call firefighters candidates who have been successful in achieving the minimum required Riverside Fire Department qualifications during a 2-year probationary period. The Village of Riverside has a significant investment in the form of time, expenditures, and the hiring and training of each Riverside paid-on-call firefighter candidate. Paid-on-call firefighters initially trained and certifications are generally completed within the 2-year probationary period. Expenditures are in the form of time, training, and equipment. In return, the paid-on-call firefighter candidate agrees to serve the village for a minimum of 2 years after their probationary period, the time needed to acquire initial training. During this 2-year time span, the initial expenditures are anticipated to be recognized through employment services. The village and Riverside Fire Department suffers substantial financial detriment and loss if the paid-on-call firefighter candidate separates from the village and the Riverside Fire Department by resignation or through failure to fulfill the requisite training or service requirements. In addition, the village and Riverside Fire Department incurs the cost to replace any lost, retained, or unreturned village-owned property. Therefore, it's recommended that the village enter a reimbursement obligation agreement with each paid-on-call firefighter candidate. The action proposed is the approval of the resolution authorizing the village manager to enter into an agreement in regard to a reimbursement obligation with each paid-on-call firefighter candidate who is hired at the Village of Riverside.
Discussion and questions for the chief?
Is this a situation that other villages find themselves in and have passed resolutions
Yes,
similar
those
to this?
departments that have paid-on-call do have a reimbursement agreement very similar to this. We've had it instituted for several years, and this form is just a more complete form, so it actually defines how, when it should be paid.
Okay.
And it just recently came up where we've had 3 candidates actually submit their resignation prior to this 2-year period, so.
So you've previously required that they repay
That's correct.
expenditures? And how do you determine what the expenditures are?
It's based on tuition costs for academy and any kind of equipment that has been issued to them, and then it depends on if they return all that equipment or not. So it's not a 100% reimbursable formula, but in the agreement, we're primarily looking for the tuition cost and any kind of equipment and costs that might have occurred with that.
And is that different than what we're doing currently?
No, it's not, at least with the last 3 cases that we're working through currently.
Mr. Bob?
Do we have a similar arrangement for our police department?
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, they're not paid on call.
Right.
Yes.
Well, it
Well,
doesn't
we
matter.
don't because that falls under the rules of the Police and Fire Commission. It actually is a state statute for the police officers. So it has to be adopted by our Police and Fire Commission first. And it's currently not in their rules.
We might want to look into that, I think, but that's for another day.
Hearing nothing further, please call the roll.
Trustee Hamilton?
Aye.
Trustee Pollak?
Aye.
Trustee Sussman?
Aye.
Trustee Bellman?
Aye.
Trustee Collins?
Aye.
Trustee Foley?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Chief. With your permission, why don't we go ahead and take care of the bond ordinance, and then that'll open things up for the CIP discussion.
Okay.
So next up is an ordinance providing for and requiring the submission of the proposition of issuing general obligation bonds to the voters of the Village of Riverside, Cook County, Illinois, at the general election to be held on the 4th day of November 2014. Ms. Francis, would you like to?
This has been an ongoing discussion between the village board with regard to the 2004 general obligation bonds that are retiring at the end of this calendar year. Back in March of 2004, there was overwhelming support to issue debt via a referendum. 80% of the vote was yes. So 2.06 million was issued in debt for streets. At that time, our bond rating was slightly less than it is now. Given that, we've evaluated with our financial advisor Spear as to how we should frame the particular referendum question. The village has been advised by Spear that depending on interest rates, we may be able to issue up to $2.5 million in debt and keep this particular issuance property tax neutral. An ordinance directing the placement of the question on the ballot for November 4th, 2014 election needs to be approved by the village board by August 18th. Attached is an ordinance and related materials providing the submission of the proposition of issuing up to $2.5 million in general obligation debt as a referendum question at the November 4th, 2014 general election. And once again, there's an emphasis that this particular issuance, if approved via referendum, would be property tax neutral.
So I'd ask for a motion to approve an ordinance providing for and requiring the submission of the proposition of issuing general obligation bonds to the voters of the Village of Riverside, Cook County, Illinois, at the general election to be held on the 4th day of November 2014.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Ballerine, second by Mr. Foley. I did have one question about the actual question itself. Because, to Director Francis's point, the importance, I think, of letting folks know that this is a property tax neutral referendum question. Is that kind of language permissible in the question itself?
No, we wouldn't recommend it in the language itself. It can be part of the material, because that's neutral, non-advocating material, so it could be issued by the village as opposed to advocates, because it's just a statement of fact. But it really, when it comes to the wording of the referendum language that appears on the ballot, it's really important to...
That's what I figured. Didn't think it hurt to ask.
Because all kinds of bad things can happen if the courts see something different.
All right, further discussion or debate about this?
Could we go over one more time I don't know if Director Bailey or Manager Scalera wants to, or Jessica, wants to go over the benefits of what this will really do for the residents by being able to have these bonds and continue to do the streets, and how much faster we could do the streets, and how much deterioration we can stop and stuff like that. I think it's very important to get this education out as we approve this.
It will accelerate the street program for the village. The village will be able to do a number of streets in a shorter period of time if the referendum is passed than continuing along on our current pace, relying on the MFT and the non-home rule sales tax.
Like 45% faster, if I remember that number.
49%.
49%, give or take.
10 miles versus 6.7.
Right.
And then even the economies of scale of having this dovetailed with the street, or the sewer, we're even able to make it even better.
Right, to complete even more streets. We have sat down with the village engineer who has put together a plan that highlights the street projects with the recommended sewer projects. And we found that there are some streets that overlap, and so by doing at the same time, we will be able to realize savings that way as well.
In addition to that, minimize disruption to residents, which obviously with construction projects, you don't want to have one project on a street and then the following calendar year have an additional project.
And just one more thing I think that should not be lost is because of the village's excellent bond rating, because of the work that Jessica and her department does, we are able to leverage this to even a higher degree than we did 20 years ago or 10 years ago when we did it last time.
Right. We are going to be able to
almost 500,
to get more,
almost $500,000 more.
25% more.
And the bond proceeds have to be spent in 2 years or 3 years?
You always want to spend down as much as you can within the 2 years, and then the remaining third year, whatever is remaining. We also have to be careful. I don't want to get too much lost in the details, but basically we have to be careful in where we're keeping the money because we don't want to be accumulating interest at a greater rate than what we're paying out on those bonds, because then we have to pay arbitrage.
So to your point, Trustee Ballerine, if you recall our streets efficiency study, which was a 10-year study, we would actually be able to do the projects that might have been in year 5 or 6 would be moved up to within the first 3 years. So it would substantially accelerate the maintenance and reconstruction of the streets. Please.
And you'll notice also when we go over the CIP that there's an extremely compressed schedule over the first 2 years with 2015 and 2016, a very aggressive plan for street improvements. That's part of us. We've built up the MFT in addition to if we have the bond issuance to then be able to do those streets in addition to that. So that makes us much more marketable as it relates to getting more vendors to then bid on those projects, those larger projects.
And the other thing residents should understand that before we had these bonds and we did this stuff, when we had to do streets, we did SSAs. And that's when we took the cost of the bond, the cost of the project, and divided it amongst the homeowners and put that amount on their taxes for a period of, 4 or 5 years, if I remember correctly, because I was gifted with that when I moved into Riverside 20-some years ago. This will alleviate that also.
Correct. And you look at debt, and as this particular referendum question is an equity stance. You don't want to utilize anything that is unassigned, is because you don't want previous property taxpayers to pay for something that is going to benefit current and future property taxpayers. So it's from an equity standpoint as well.
When we talk about that, we're going to be able to do some sewer projects also that will hopefully help with some of the flooding issues and things like that in town. Should sewers be included in this wording, or just streets be included here because we're not going to use any of these dollars?
We won't be using any of these dollars for sewer projects. We will use the water and sewer fund to pay for those projects.
Okay.
Anything else? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Trustee Hamilton?
Aye.
Trustee Pollard?
Aye.
Trustee Sussman? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Trustee Sussman?
Aye.
Okay. Trustee Ballerine?
Aye.
Trustee Collins?
Aye.
Trustee Foley?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, now,
Mr. President?
pardon me?
Mr. President?
Mr. President, I need to sign off now. Thank you for allowing me to participate.
Thank you very much, Trustee. Godspeed to you and your family. Thought this thing was going to start
You can't get rid
hovering.
of Gene that easily.
That's right. Okay. All right, we're now backing up now. We now turn to our capital improvement plan discussion. The way we're going to handle this is Director Francis is going to give us a general overview, and then if trustees, if you have specific questions about certain expenditures that are being proposed for the 2015 fiscal year, we'll just go by department, and we'll just go down the list, and you can, our department's heads are here and can answer any questions you might have. So, Director Francis.
3 years ago, we started doing a 10-year capital improvement plan versus a 5-year. And it was just from the stance of we were looking ahead. We're a non-home rule community. We're constrained by property tax, so we wanted to be a little bit more proactive in our planning stance. So I'm actually very proud of the most recent, not that I wasn't proud of the prior plans, but I feel like this is probably the most complete and comprehensive plan that we've put together thus far, because we have the sidewalk study, we have the street management program, also we've evaluated the needs with sewer. So this is an extremely comprehensive plan that staff has undertaken, and this is actually the 3rd year that staff has worked on updating it. So I just wanted to note that as well. It should be noted that the capital equipment purchases and projects are discussed multiple times during the budget process. So I don't want the board to feel as though by saying that we can incorporate this as part of our budget process, by no means is this actually voting on this project this evening. There will be an inclusion as the capital progression process and the budget process. If you recall, last year during the budget process, I had a list of the capital items, the respective funds, and the progression. Some items were moved and deferred, other items were added in, just based on need and then the status of capital and budget discussions. Also, I would want to make note that items, given our previous discussion, that are related to the referendum question are noted as being bond contingent under the CIP. And the items that I wanted to address or bring focus to the board on are the issues to consider. During the budget process last year, it was decided by this board that we would decide as to the capital items that were to be budgeted, and at the end, prior to the start of that fiscal year, we would then do a transfer from the general fund unassigned to the capital projects to fund capital projects in the following fiscal year. So I just wanted to make note of that, just so that we keep that on our radar. Also, during that discussion, we discussed the general obligation bonds that are going to be retiring. As we just discussed, that particular item is going to be brought forth to the voters via referendum. And so we will incorporate that as part of the budget. And if for some reason that is not approved by the voters, then obviously that expenditure and revenue would not be booked for fiscal year 2015. A new item is actually with regard to capital and capitalization of both equipment and improvements. In early 2013, the village board increased the procurement threshold for the village manager from $10,000 to $20,000. Currently, items that are capitalized in the capital projects fund have to be $10,000 or greater. What I'm bringing forward to the board is whether or not the board would consider changing the capitalization threshold for essentially it's our accounting purposes from $10,000 to $20,000 to make it consistent with our purchasing policy. In addition to that, there are items with regard to the CIP for example, for Parks and Rec that we have always included, even though they have been well below that $10,000 threshold. Whether or not the board wants to continue to do that, not only for capital planning purposes in 2015, or whether or not that's just incorporated as a capital line item under under the general fund budget for the respective departments. If it does not meet, whether the board goes through the $10,000 threshold or the $20,000 threshold, depending on what the board decides. I believe that was my last item.
So those are the decisions that you need to will be voted on as part of the actual budget presentation itself.
Well, yes, I think one of the things that we're looking for this evening is whether or not any of those items are of concern to the board and whether or not they needed to be discussed further, or any questions we may have that we may be able to answer for you this evening.
As well as whether or not what the board might be thinking or considering about the suggestion that Jessica makes about having the thresholds be equivalent, the purchasing threshold and the capitalization thresholds.
So let me just bring one thing out.
Sure.
And this will help me understand it. For example, on here there's this, and I don't mean to jump to a particular department, but I'm going to do that just because this is less than 20. There's a zero-turn lawnmower for $14,000. So if I'm understanding correctly, this would no longer be on there. Peter would have the ability to then purchase that upon its replacement.
It would still be purchased, however, it would be incorporated as part of, instead of it being under capital projects, it would be under the general fund budget. And we could have a separate line item where it would still be associated as a capital item, so it wouldn't be as a regular operating expense. However, it wouldn't reach the threshold where it would fall under the capital projects, nor for our accounting purposes be viewed as a fixed asset.
Or to make it even simpler, basically, it would move from here into the department's operating budget. And so the board annually approves the budget, and in the line items, it would show that we are planning, as part of the total for equipment, it would show that we're purchasing this item. So the board would still, during the budget review process, have the ability to question staff on whether or not that purchase plan for the preceding year is needed, and with the approval of the budget. But if they approve it, then there would be no need for it to come back to the board for approval. It just would get incorporated into their operating budget.
What I don't like about some of these items, for example, the mower, and again, I'm just using that because it's less than 20, the reason for it is program replacement. That to me doesn't mean anything. If the mower still works, I don't want to replace it, whether it's 5 years old or whether it's 15 years old. So if we give you the ability to then go ahead and purchase this when it has a problem, are we out of the program replacement business? Because that's what I don't get.
Yeah. I can tell you that we drive those things to the ground.
No, that's not my question.
We wouldn't. I think annually, which I do currently, we sit down with each of the departments to determine whether or not a certain piece of equipment has reached its life expectancy and whether it should be included. So I'm thinking that would still continue regardless of whether it's on the capital program or in their operating budget.
But I think, to your point, Trustee Bellarine, I think Public Works extends the life of their equipment and then some. So as it relates to, they don't necessarily have it on a cycle as to, okay, it's been 5 years, time to replace it. They do it more in coordination with how many repairs have we had to make. Does it make sense for us to keep extending the life where we're making a $1,000 repair on a $14,000 item?
Okay.
But can I just clarify, because the way that I heard Jessica and Peter explaining this was that instead of the trustees having a chance to discuss whether or not it was an appropriate inclusion in any year's part of the capital improvement plan, we would be discussing whether it was an appropriate inclusion in that department's budget for the year. So we get a bite at the apple either way. It's just what they're saying is it wouldn't appear under the capital improvement plan, and they wouldn't be,
It would
I'm
still
sorry.
be listed as equipment, but not in the capital.
you wouldn't be considering it a capital asset, that's what I'm, yeah.
Exactly, and also in the greater scheme of things with a capital improvement plan, you really want to focus in on the larger ticket items. Not that the smaller ticket items aren't important, but obviously something that's $20,000, you want to focus in more on versus items that are $10,000. So it's also a function of how we move forward in whether or not the capital improvement plan evolves or whether or not it stays at the $10,000 threshold, and that's what we maintain for inclusion of various projects and or equipment.
Forgive my ignorance for asking this same question again, basically. The things with Parks and Rec that are under 10,000 that are listed here, so why are those here?
Because it's been the policy and practice that those be included, because Parks and Rec, how it was done in the past, where it was just grouped together. And now we've been actually in the last few years actually breaking them out. Whereas in the past, it would be equipment replacement and there would be X amount of dollars that would be budgeted.
So because they're looking at 21,000 total, okay.
Correct. But also in the function of, for Parks and Rec, because they've been funding their own equipment replacement costs, there's also been that request to put in capital projects and be funded by the Parks and Recreation.
I'm just trying to understand why things are here and why they're on the other.
But they wouldn't be in the future under this you suggest.
So what is the benefit to you of raising this threshold to 20,000? What is the?
If the board were to decide not that items, whether it be equipment or improvements in infrastructure, to capitalize at 20,000, then staff would not have to then monitor equipment replacement. Not that we wouldn't monitor equipment replacement, but for purposes of disposal from capital assets that's reported in the comprehensive annual financial report, we would no longer have to track those. So that would minimize the number of capital assets that we have to update every year.
You're still depreciating them the same way. Is that
correct?
But you wouldn't have to go through the process that the state requires on declaring them whatever you call
We
them.
still declare even smaller items as surplus, it's just a good practice. So, for example, desktops and things of that sort, we still declare as surplus. However, as it relates to capital assets, tracking those smaller items that are between 10 and 20,000 would provide a little bit of relief with tracking going forward.
And I think that's the other point too, is that this definition of a capital asset at $10,000 is an old definition. It's been around as long as I can remember. And the fact of the matter is nowadays, there's not much you can buy for $10,000 in this kind of equipment. So I think in terms of just the thematic idea of what a capital asset is, it makes more sense to look at a larger ticket item than something that's in the $10,000, $12,000 range.
And different communities have varying capitalization thresholds. Some of them actually don't capitalize infrastructure until $125,000, until a project is at that level or greater. Some capitalize all vehicles regardless of cost, which obviously most vehicles are over $20,000 anyway. So many of our surrounding communities are actually looking at increasing where their capitalization threshold is. The bulk of them are still at 10,000. For example, Clarendon Hills is looking to increase theirs, similar to what we're looking at. Western Springs is actually, for their infrastructure, it's from 25,000 for actually any type of equipment. So all their vehicles they capitalize, and then any equipment that's 25,000 or more they capitalize, and then their infrastructure is anything greater than 125,000. So there's different varying formulas, whatever fits the needs of the community. I was just thinking from a streamlining standpoint, it would just make sense to have it consistent with our purchasing policy that whatever the village board is approving should be obviously capitalized.
But the board would not lose oversight of these expenditures. To Trustee Hamilton's point, it would just be, you would review it at a different place other than the capital. Mr. Pope?
And moving things up and back can be done now or at any time?
With regard to the
Projects or equipment purchasing, so forth. I'm seeing stuff for instance, let's take this.
Oh, yeah, I think that we're going to get to that part. Yeah, that can be done during the CIP discussion at any time.
So, yes, Mr. Pope?
Well, I completely support what's being recommended. I think it makes perfect sense. An item like a zero-turn mower, that's a budgetary item. My question, though, is do we have an equipment replacement fund, and do we fund that annually, or how do we pay for things right now in 10,000?
It's part of the operating budget.
Do we have a specific? I guess that's what I'm saying. So we're going to spend, for example, $14,000 on this mower, and we know in how many years will we have to replace it? 10 years?
7.
7 years. So we know
5.
In order to replace it, let's say 7 years for argument.
5 to 7 years.
Ideally, we'd put $2,000 in the kitty in the equipment replacement fund every year, so that we're ready.
We do not have that.
We do not do that. Is that something we should consider?
The ability of not doing that, you have the unassigned fund balance, and so you have the ability then to shift those dollars around based on whatever the equipment need is at that given time versus, I understand what you're saying, basically amortizing the life of that particular equipment and saying we're going to essentially pay for our replacement in advance.
Well, I'm not suggesting that the $2,000 a year be limited to just that mower, but when you add up all the $14,000 mowers and whatever, you know that you need $20,000 a year to buy those things again when they come up. Now, I'm not suggesting that we can always be 100% funded in that, but it would give us an idea of where we're at, so that when we make other decisions on spending, we know, okay, we're only at 70% of funding our equipment replacement fund, and we're only at 40%. We better not buy that. We better wait another year on that car and try to get the fund out.
But I think that's why we have this out to 2024.
I was just going to say, I thought that was really kind of the point of this, is we really kind of accomplish what you're saying, because we see our equipment needs over the next 10 years. We know what our unassigned balances are. We know what our routine surpluses are in a given year. So we really have that information. It's just not seriatim. We haven't broken it up into items.
We have that for the capital projects.
Right.
But it feeds into the budget, though.
We don't have that for equipment replacement.
Well, all of the larger priced items or equipment or vehicles would still remain in here. The mower, I view that as a operating item, and that we would monitor the life of it and the use of it, and that's just a vital piece of equipment that we are going to need.
And a similar sentiment of essentially the unassigned. Having it within the general fund gives us the ability to then, whether it's equipment replacement in the general fund or whether we're making a transfer of those unassigned fund balances to fund items that are $20,000 more, we have that particular flexibility. Because ultimately, whether it is what is derived as routine capital that's under the general fund, that's under $20,000 or under $10,000, there's always going to be the potential of that to be funded by prior year surpluses.
But what I understand is what Doug is saying, and I think what you're saying is this is not what you're saying, but what I'm saying is if we take this out of here, we lose track of those small items because they are no longer in the CIP being paid out of undesignated reserves. So we lose track of the smaller items, the zero-turn lawnmowers, the gators, the baseball field. We lose track of that stuff, where in here, at least we have a track of it, basically know what we have for the next 10 years and what kind of funds we have in the next, in the next 10 years, and we have everything laid out. If we put it into a budgetary, it's no longer, we lose track of those items. So that's why I don't.
Well, I don't think we would lose track of it. Staff would always be tracking it, and I think it's kind of, it shifts from.
But staff isn't always staff. I mean, we have wonderful staff here today, but staff is ever evolving.
But I think regardless of who holds what position, there's a kind of a plan in place, a maintenance plan for all of our equipment that we follow. That some of the plans were here before some of us even got here, that we follow, that we know that if we get this piece of equipment in year Y, it's only going to take us to year Z. So
yeah, see, I don't
Wait,
agree with that.
now I'm confused. Well, now I'm confused. Okay, right now the zero-turn mower shows up on the capital list, and the trustees get to see a zero-turn mower for $14,000. If we did what you suggested, would they see, at some point, a zero-turn mower for $14,000?
It would be incorporated as part of a line item within that respective department's budget, so you would see it.
Would it say zero-turn mower, $14,000?
You wouldn't have not unless you actually read through the breakout detail for those particular line items. Would you have an opportunity to see it? Yes, because we do provide the detail in the notes.
Yeah, but we wouldn't know about it as a capital project, so we wouldn't necessarily have the money saved for it.
But that's because we're redefining what a capital project is.
I understand that, exactly, and I still think that is a capital project. To Doug's point, if he wants to put $2,000 away every year for this zero-turn lawnmower, which is basically what we're doing with this program. If we don't do that, if we don't have this program, and if we don't have those items in here, then it becomes a budgetary item, and then it comes into the budget, and we don't have the money in the budget. What happens if we have the budget's not in the budget, and 7 years come from now, you need a $15,000 lawnmower. That's still not chump change. So I think without it in here, we lose sight of it.
Another way to look at what I'm saying is that instead of just having this chunk of unassigned reserves, that we have some scientifically concluded or mathematically based number that we know of that unassigned reserve, we better have X amount of dollars, because every year we're going to have to spend so much on equipment replacement. Now, I understand what you're saying about flexibility. I don't buy that, though, because you can always move it out of the equipment replacement fund if your priorities change. If you have $100,000 in the equipment replacement fund and you see you're short on a street project, you can just move it. The board can decide to move it. We know we're going to be underfunded a little bit on this equipment replacement, but at least that's an educated decision we make. This may be too much for this discussion tonight, but I think it's something I brought up a year ago in the budget process, and I still feel that's something we should be striving for. And I realize how difficult it is that you're going to start, if we were to do that, we're going to see that we're underfunded in a lot of areas. But I'd rather know that than not know it.
Well, why don't we set with this one? Since we're just now, I can see both sides of this. If we turn to page 5, though, with the issues to consider, I think that there's a consensus with the first and the second one. We just voted on the second one, so obviously we're going to do that one. But with regard to our general plan of transferring unassigned funds for the following year, like we did last year, is that something we want to continue to do? And then we can think about this third one, and maybe you can provide additional arguments in terms of a memo or something to the trustees, and then we can decide about that later.
Well, is there any, I didn't hear any dispute on whether to increase the 10 to 20. I thought we were in agreement.
Mr. Valerie,
you're not sure?
I'm pretty sure.
I am sure that I'm okay with that. I'm just suggesting another step.
I'm sure I'm okay with that.
That's fine, okay.
I'm okay, I'm sure that I'm not okay with it, because I don't want to lose it out of the capital. But that's,
You guys want to think about it?
Another option is that we can continue to keep it as part of the CIP, but then there can be the direction of the board that we no longer have to capitalize projects that are less than $20,000. So you can still incorporate it as the capital plan and still have that oversight. However, for fixed asset purposes and accounting purposes and tracking.
okay, I can live with that.
Could
Because
I-
that's really what your end game is, am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, I could live with that. But Doug can't.
Well, no, I can. In fact, basically, I keep thinking of different ways to frame this, what I'm trying to portray here. Basically, what I'm saying is, in addition to a capital improvement plan, we have an equipment replacement plan.
I get
It's the same
that.
thing.
I see it.
It's just two different things instead of
I agree.
molded together.
So, what do you guys think?
I need the version for dummies.
You want looking
I
to
would
sit
like-
with it
yeah.
for a while? Okay, let's come back to this at the next meeting. Okay, so now let's move on to the 2015 specific expenditures. I think some folks have a portrait view, some folks have a landscape view. Everybody has landscape, okay. So let's just go by department. Are there any questions concerning the Public Works? The first one is the bond contingent street program that is pending the referendum. So next up would be the two items for 2015 for fire. Any questions or comments about that?
I do.
Mr. Kamira?
2014, we approved.
Hold on
Oh,
a
I'm sorry.
second. Mr. Kamira?
Oh.
We're on page 12 with regard to the 2015 capital projects proposed by fire, and Trustee Ballerine has some questions.
In last year, we approved for Public Works, I believe, fleet maintenance software. Has that been installed?
Not yet. I was going to say, if I did get an opportunity to stand at the podium tonight, that
Oh, you will.
We're saving you for last.
in a 2014 capital budget is fleet maintenance software. There's a budgeted item. We're in the process of acquiring that, and that is something that will be critical to determining, both from the staff's perspective and being able to explain to the elected officials, especially when it comes to equipment, why we think it should be replaced. We don't have it yet. I have a August 13th date, or August 15th date, where we're going to get proposals or have presentations by 3 companies. But that's what that's all about, you know, all this discussion of why. Well, we will be able to track it ourselves, and we can say that, yes, this equipment deserves consideration for proposals, or for replacement, for these reasons, accumulated expenses. And then when this is, whatever level it is that it's presented to the village board, you'll have a...
So that will be up in August 15th, you're saying?
August 15th, we'll select a software program.
Okay. When will this thing be up and running where we'll have this information?
This year. I don't know how long, it might depend upon the actual software that is selected, but a big part of that process, once the software is selected, is data input.
Right.
And each department,
Has to do
police,
that.
fire, and public works, all will have their own modules. So everybody will be updating or inputting data to that system.
Well, if it was approved for 2014, why are we not doing it until August?
Because I didn't get around to it. You know, it's...
But how are we supposed to consider these if we don't have the information?
Well, a lot of the equipment that's up on here is feedback that we've received from our current mechanic or Riverside Garage, who has evaluated a number of the vehicles that drive the streets.
So has the two police cars have they had a comprehensive examination at Riverside Garage in the last 90 days?
As far as the two fire vehicles up
Yeah.
for replacement for 2015, not a comprehensive replacement, but I've had the two vehicles looked at in regards to 1601 or the 2004 vehicle. We suffered many $7,700 in repairs in the last 2 years, including battery replacement. So that is taken into consideration. My vehicle, or the 2009 Crown Vic replacement, is looked at as far as mileage and what is mileage expected for next year in regards to, and also corrosion on that vehicle. Rest of the vehicle seems to be in okay.
How many miles were put on that vehicle this year?
Which one, 2000?
The command, your vehicle?
70, we're at 77,000.
77? So how many miles were put on this year?
Probably about 12,000, about 10,000, maybe 10,000.
So we don't know. I personally, and I think I brought this up last year, when these two came up last year, I think we should have a comprehensive detail done by Riverside Garage, or I shouldn't say them, but and whoever does the service on the vehicle, that's what we should have, because these aren't vehicles that are on all the time where mileage is not a statement of the actual condition of the car. I think there's a lot of people in this village have automobiles with more than 73,000 miles on them.
Correct. But
So-
they are, I mean, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
The mileage is reflected of a lot of idle time, and we do leave these vehicles idle at the fire scene, so these staff vehicles do respond to emergency calls, and so even though it is, mileage is just a small indication of the wear and tear on these vehicles. They do get wear and tear pretty close to police vehicles too, because they do remain running when we respond to emergency situations.
And the reason they remain running is because both vehicles, depending on the situation, can serve as the command center for the incident, and therefore that vehicle is the hub of firefighters reporting on status on certain projects that are assigned to them, or responding units from outside of Riverside. I guess what I'd like to mention is I think one of the things that we can do is, between now and when it comes back during the budget discussion, for certain vehicles that you indicate this evening, we can have Riverside Garage complete a report on those vehicles. I believe the police department has already done that, so that is not an issue there. And Public Works vehicles are reviewed by our mechanic, and so anything in here has already been considered by him.
Would that help?
That would help.
Is that okay with everybody? So anything else with regard to these vehicles, or we'll wait to hear?
I'd like to wait to hear until the report.
Okay. So we'll hold off then. Okay, thank you, Chief. Parks and Recreation. Any comments, questions for Director Malchiotti?
Just, this is the last of the tennis courts, am I correct?
Yes, this is the last of them. The Indian Gardens was done in regard to the Lyons Township grant. We also did Blythe Park, which we had to shut down for a while as it was unsafe. We redid that 2 years ago. So this is the last of the tennis courts, and the surface now is approaching where we may have to shut it down. So once this is completed, then all of those will be in a normal rotation.
And when we did we, I know we talked about it at the commission level or the recreation board level, have we removed, I thought I saw we did remove the gates from there so people can't lock them any longer?
We did. We removed sections of the fencing at Blythe and at Harrington, and we've also chained the doors open at Indian Gardens because we were having the same problem there.
Can you just do me a favor and explain why we are going through all the issues of taking gates and chaining them open and taking fences away and leaving the gates open, leaving the tennis courts exposed like they are? So if somebody has a question, they'll know why.
The tennis courts were being used as kind of,
No, not kind of. They were being used as dog parks.
They were used as
dog runs.
Any enclosure they were using as de facto dog parks. So by removing the enclosure aspect of it, it's still protected. They can still utilize it for tennis, but it takes away the enclosure part and deters them ruining the surface by allowing dogs.
And not because we don't like dogs, because dogs' claws do damage the surface of the court.
We are directing all dogs to Miller Meadow Dog Park.
And if you're at Miller Meadows, you better clean up after your dog, because we know what happens if you don't clean up over there. All right, thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, Director. Next up is police. Questions or comments?
My only question, I feel like Lonnie Sachi, I miss Lonnie sometimes, because he would do all these hard ones. The bi-directional amplifier for police frequency over at the RB school, boy, as much money, as much time and as much effort as we put into that school, I really feel that should be coming out of the school should be ponying up for more than 50% of this. God, if we took the hours that we spend over there and the time and the effort, and it just seems like they should be more of a partner in that particular project.
Can you explain, Chief, what this is?
Yeah, we have a problem. That's the only building in the village where our radio frequency has an extreme problem getting out back to the 911 center. And it's probably due because there's good construction. The walls are very, very not good to penetrate for our radio system. It won't reach the repeaters the right way to come to our station. So I was going to ask, I have not asked the school superintendent, I'll make that clear, but we got prices on what they cost. They cost between $18,000 and $20,000 currently. It's a sophisticated device that will go in the complex over at the high school, or it could go adjacent to it, but the manufacturer recommends that it be inside the building for weather protection. And it'll bounce the signal to us, to the 911 center. So I was going to ask the superintendent if he could bring it to his board, if this board was interested in pursuing it, because I didn't want to bring it over there if we weren't looking into it, to split half, because it would directly benefit the students and staff and his visitors to the school, because it is a device just for that facility. While it does help us get out to our 911 center, it's not helping anybody. The radio coverage within the village is fine. So it's just the building at RV High School itself.
But is this when the officers are in the building? It's their radio that's the signal that we need to bounce?
Yes, it's the portable radio, because we don't have car radios anymore.
Okay.
That's the only radio they use.
So to your question, it's our officers' safety that's at issue here. So I do see that we would want to support this, but I do feel that the school definitely, this is to their benefit, and that they should look into supporting this also.
And I do have a schedule. We are having a kickoff meeting with the District 96 and a separate one with 208, so we come up to speed at the beginning of the school year, and I'm going to speak to the superintendent. We're having lunch in early August, and I was going to let him know about my desire to purchase this product and to ask him to bring it to his board.
Well, I would be happy. I agree with what you're saying, that it's the officer's safety, but I would think that the school I would support half, because I think the school has to be a partner in this.
Right, I would not support more than half. I would like to support less than half, but
yeah.
I think it should be presented as a matching fund.
Yeah, I can't speak for the school board, but the superintendent at RB has been very receptive to partnering with us. And if we lay it out the right way and give him the right information and it's presented, at least he has an opportunity to present it to his board. And then I would come back to you and let you know if their board is interested in splitting the cost.
So how about if the chief and I talk to 208? See what we can do. Okay. Anything else for police?
Just this vehicle that's on here is not the vehicle that we just talked about. This is another vehicle. Correct?
It is. I originally had 3. I deferred the chief's car, and there's no, now with this car is being, the 2014 is being replaced, I just dropped it to 1 car, and that $40K is not going to be the price. That would be the price of the car and the
changeover,
the equipment. But remember, we won't have a trade-in probably. It depends on what goes on with the cars being replaced. We contacted the state, the central management, who handles the purchases, and they won't have the state bids out until November. So I can't give you the cost of any squad car, whether it's a Ford or a Chevy or a Dodge, until the bids return.
Thank you.
Any questions about the access and control? Because we've been bumping this one along now for...
I could mention one thing, Mr. President and trustees. My staff, we looked at the door system again, and it was a joint effort between us and the fire department, but we went around and we're going to reduce ours, because what myself and the deputy chief and lieutenant did is we took out offices. So today, as we were walking around the building, we originally, that amount that's in there would have originally counted for 16 doors at the police department. We've brought that down to 9 because we just want to do the exterior doors, the evidence room, and the 911 center. So that would bring us down to 9 doors. And according to the vendors that we've talked to about the project, that is about $1,000 a door when you're talking the storage capacity. You have to have a system that'll store the information. So we will be dropping that from 15 doors down to just 9, because there's no reason we could come up with that we need a card access to personal offices. We only want to track people that really are coming in and out of the facility and the evidence room. So I could see that overall budget item coming down $10,000, at least from the police department.
Everybody, any questions about that? Okay. Thank you, Chief. And now, since you were afraid you were going to be left out, Public Works. And about that mower.
Come on down.
So I have one question just to start out, and I apologize, I should have asked you this before. What is the contaminated soil removal?
This, when the Public Works facility was built approximately 10 years ago, as you all know, it was built on an existing landfill. And as part of the construction process, some of the surface material was pushed up into a mound that's behind, would be on the north side of the Public Works facility. And it sits there. It's not hazardous material, but it's contaminated soil, so it has to have special consideration, special handling when it's disposed of. And it can sit there indefinitely. I understand we can move it around on the site. If we're taking it off the site, it has to go to a special waste facility. It's just unusable space. It's a mound of soil, and it's
a pretty big area.
Yeah. There is no public land available for any purpose, for any department or anything like that in the village that I know of. And this represents one of the only areas that could be cleared to make some space available for something. The Public Works Department could expand storage into that area, but it's totally useless right now.
And we have been talking about storage problems.
If we ever have a problem with this garage back here that Ron's crew uses, that would be a great location for a pole barn, for a rec department, or just any other type of storage. But the amount of earth that he's talking about having removed, you could put a very decent sized barn in that location to handle storage.
So with regard to that, do you think if you were to move things around in the existing storage facilities you have, do you think you could free up adequate space for the vehicle storage and the storage for Parks and Rec? I guess I'm just asking, do we really need this space right now, that we need to do this?
It should be noted that this $110,000 will not remove that entire pile. It will make a big dent in the pile, but it will not remove the entire pile.
We removed about $10,000 worth last year, and just, if for nothing else, to see what $10,000 would get us. And it didn't make that much of a dent. Another significant issue with that contaminated soil pile is it's heavily wooded these days. In the 10 years, trees have grown up, and when this material is hauled to the appropriate landfill, the landfill will not accept any vegetative material. So all of those trees, the roots, the trunks, and everything have to be pulled out of there. So it is quite an operation to move it. It's not simple.
But I guess what I'm trying to press is why now? I mean, do we have other alternatives over there for storage space?
From my perspective right now, from a public works perspective, we don't have space available for anything else, and this would, I would anticipate this would be outdoor storage, like we store our snow plows. Some of our snow plows are certainly an extra spare snow plow outside, but equipment we're storing inside, sheltered. Even a chipper we put into cold storage, but it's in a shelter. We don't have to move it. We can let it sit there for another 10 years, quite frankly.
And then you'll have a forest on a mound.
Right.
We have a forest now on the mountain.
Yeah.
Right.
But we also have parking in the old youth center that I don't think is necessarily utilized to its best effect either.
In the garage space?
On the garage space as well as some of the other parts. I mean, we have.
Well, the bay in the back here is full. Are you talking about the basement, parking in the basement?
I mean, I've been down there a few times. There's a few cars down there. There's some bikes down there, some lockup stuff. But
yeah, but you're not going to get a lot of heavy equipment.
I don't want to get heavy equipment. I want to get a couple trucks from the rec department down there.
Well, we've heard a description of what this is, so we can.
I put it out. There's nothing urgent about it.
Yeah, so we can think about it as we move into the budget. So, anybody else have any other questions? That was mine.
I just had one, not on this one, but on Public Works.
Yeah.
I see two items for the youth center. I guess I just ask a broad question. When do we address that building as opposed to keep spending money to maintain it?
Well, that's the $5 million question.
Literally.
Yeah, literally. I mean, every time I'm like you, every time I see something on here for that, it grates at me. But the reality is that in order to do anything with that youth center, we're talking about a referendum question, because that's the kind of money it's going to take to do anything that's going to make a difference over there. But I agree with you that we can't continue just to wait from year to year on this.
Ed, talk to me about the sewer vacuum.
That's a Vector truck. It's not something I've proposed myself, but I'm quite familiar with them. It's basically a large vacuum cleaner on a truck chassis with a hose that goes.
I know what they are.
Okay.
Do we? And so we spend annually about $60,000 a year contracting out for someone to come out and do our vac service for us.
That's what I think the average is going to be, something around.
In the last couple of years, we have not been spending the amount that we should have been spending for the catch basin and sewer cleaning. And in discussing with Public Works Director Bailey, if we went to a private contract like we do right now, really to do it where it's effective on an annual basis, we're talking about $60,000 a year. So during the discussion,
is there a consortium for that, like sidewalks, like we pool up with other towns?
it would be an individual contract.
Okay. Towns don't get together and hire a guy to vacuum out.
It's possible, and it should be, certainly a question that should be asked and explored. As far as this Vector truck, I just want to make note that we purchased last year a new sewer jetter rotor for cleaning sewer mains. And certainly a Vector truck can be outfitted to clean sewer mains also. It's frequently used to clean catch basins and manholes and that kind of stuff. So I think, this item, if the village board keeps it in the capital budget for next year, it certainly deserves some investigation and analysis. Just for example, another thing I would wonder about as well, where would we store it, for instance? There's some merits to acquiring one. It's obviously a significant piece of equipment. One other item of significant concern to me is, can we actually man it? Because if we were to purchase a $400,000 piece of equipment, I think almost certainly from a private business standpoint, you would want that piece of equipment on the road quite a bit, not just occasionally. So, it's very effective. You can do hydro excavations with it instead of the traditional backhoe, digging a hole and hoping you don't hit a utility. You inject high pressure water into the parkway, turns the soil into a solution. You suck it out, and you almost totally eliminate the potential for hitting another gas main or telephone line. You can clean out water valve boxes with it. So there's things to be said for acquiring one, but I think at that price level, we got to think long and hard about it and exactly what use we're going to get out of it, and can we actually man it, and what it would take to man it.
Would it make more sense than to push it to 2016, 2017, and let that research be done then before we?
I worry about manning it, and I also worry about you suck out the stuff out of the sewer.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't just get thrown off into the back.
No. We put it on the mound.
On the mound in the back. We have to do something with that, and that's an expense. And
that's right. That's a note I have for what it's worth. Is there's an increased operating cost probably associated with you potentially probably saving contractual costs to clean catch basins, but on the other hand, you still have potentially increased operating costs. I don't know what they would be, but I'm quite certain you can't just throw that material away.
Right, I would assume that. The other question, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jim.
No, go ahead.
I just had one more question. It was the gator, getting rid of the golf cart and getting a gator. I'd like to see us get something, Ed, that would help. I mean, the gator is a pretty practical, useful vehicle. I know it can haul more than a golf cart can. It can go quicker than a golf cart and probably make it easier for you to get around town. But I'd like to see us look at a vehicle that can be used more in a year-round application for snow removal and stuff. I think you and I talked a little bit about like a Unimog or some sort of I've seen in other communities they'll have these small gator-type vehicles. I think Burridge might even have one that has different attachments for it.
Toolkit. There's one called a toolkit.
You can dig with them. You can blow snow with them. You can, move dirt and sand with it, whatever. But and it has the hauling capacity of a gator. I'd rather see us get into looking at equipment that's more year-round useful than just having a utility vehicle that we're going to shuttle, landscape stuff around.
That's one of the things I'm pointing towards here. The genesis of this is that we have two utility carts or golf carts. One's electric, one's gas operated, and currently the gas operated, and I don't know the age, but they've been around for a while. The gas operated golf cart or utility cart has a transaxle that's about to go. We know it's wearing down probably from overloading it, quite frankly. That's probably a factor. $1,500 to replace it, and I'm loath to suggest that we replace that transaxle for $1,500 for a very limited use vehicle. We only use them during the summer months and can't tow anything, can't haul much with it. So that's what I was proposing here, is to move up at least into a gator's a trade name actually, but it's more of a utility vehicle. It's more of a load capacity, can be used year-round. Probably not to I know it's not what Trustee Foley is referring to, but at least it's a level or two above a golf cart. So
Are there
I think
more
that-
sustainable alternatives other than the gas-powered gators? I mean, are there electrical or hybrid vehicles that could perform
Probably.
these kind of functions?
Sure. Different alternative fuels, probably.
Oh, and they even have electric utility vehicles now. I mean, I don't know how
I would
long
like to
those
explore
last running in
that
town.
alternative too, for the local use like this, since it's going to be.
I think we did a great job with snow removal last year with a minimal amount of equipment and equipment that was constantly in flux and being repaired. And I'd like us, part of it, especially if we're making a commitment to the CBD and replacing the streetscape, is making equipment purchases that will be able to take care of this.
Very good point.
Okay, Emerald Ash Borer, of the 62,000.
So, do we want him to look into these other alternative vehicles as opposed to the gas-powered gator? Okay.
And then we're pushing the.
And then the $400,000 for the sewer vac, we want to push that a year or two till we've done more research. And also, we can talk to our neighboring communities and see if there might be some interest in joint purchase or something like that too. Sorry.
Just of the $62,000 we appropriated in 2014, how did we do?
Actually, we appropriated $200,000, I think, for this year. This is what we're proposing for 2015 is $62,000 for emerald ash tree removal. And we will expend that entire amount for ash tree removal this year. We're kind of on a downward cycle of them. I don't have the statistics available right now. I have that conversation, but we're actually trying to begin focusing now on reforestation. Actually, we still have ash trees to remove, but one of the things that we did is focus on the large ones over the last couple of years that were beyond our capacity to remove. We had to contract for them. Doesn't mean there aren't still some large ash trees out there, but as they get smaller, they're less expensive to remove, and then we're probably more capable of removing them in-house when they're smaller. So the removals, I think, are winding down, and what we're proposing to do is really focus on reforestation to catch up.
I see the reforestation. I think that's important.
Right.
And I just have one more, and that's the front end loader. If we get a new one, can we keep the old one going and use it as a backup or in an assistance in a larger project?
Here's the issue with the end loader. Right now we have a combination end loader backhoe. It's relatively small in size. The bucket is about 1.5 cubic yards. And that's really the workhorse of the department as far as I'm concerned. We use it for water utility excavation, any kind of excavation we do, snow removal issues. The end loader would make us somewhat more efficient because, just for example, when we have a water main break and they happen, who knows, spontaneously, the end loader backhoe is out on the excavation and digs into the ground, and when they're ready to start backfilling, then the backhoe has to go back to the shop and fill the trucks with stone to backfill the hole, and then come back out to help. So we only have one vehicle to do all this end loader type work.
That's why I was asking if we could keep both.
We have to keep the end loader. It's important. That's the most important piece of equipment we have, really. This end loader would save wear and tear on that existing piece of equipment.
Primarily shuttle material, spend its life in the yard filling trucks and then be used in the winter for snow removal.
Yeah, it almost certainly would have a larger bucket, perhaps. It's just nothing has been finalized, but maybe a 3 cubic yard bucket. We fill the salt trucks with those in winter. It would fill them faster, obviously. When we're doing water main excavation, we just move that much faster. And obviously, for snow removal issues, it's a lot more effective to, the bigger the equipment.
Anything else for Public Works? Thank you, sir. And the only other thing really here is the E911. Any questions about the generator or the dispatch radio consoles? Okay. Ms. Francis, is that all you need from us tonight with regard to the Capitol? There are no considerations. Does anyone have any new business to discuss? Hearing none, we do have need for an executive session tonight to discuss pending litigation. No decisions will be made or final action taken, and we will not reconvene. So with that in mind, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Foley, second by Ms. Collins. Please call the roll.
Trustee Hamilton?
Aye.
Trustee Pollak?
Aye.
Trustee Valerie?
Aye.
Trustee Collins?
Aye.
Trustee Foley?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.